Okay, I think we'll start the meeting. We can start. Yeah.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our distinguished guests, speakers, and dear participants. First of all the attendees are requested to kindly keep their microphone on mute and their videos shut so that they can receive the adequate bandwidth. So today's topic for the webinar is Global Campaign for Democratic China Uniting Against Chinese Communist Party's Repressive Regime. Now I would like to welcome the distinguished guests over here and speakers. We would, on behalf of Law and Society and Defense Capital, I would like to welcome Ninong Ering, former Minister in Government of India and present-day Member of Legislative Assembly, Arunachal Pradesh. Haji Sayyid Salman Chisti, Ajmer Sharif Chairman, Chisti Foundation, Ajmer, Rajasthan, India. Zheng Zhu, co-founder and vice president, Canadian Coalition Against Communism, Toronto, Canada. Ishat Hassan Kogbor, director of Chinese Department, World Uyghur Congress, New York, United States. Tilne Chuki, special appointee for human rights at the Tibetan Bureau, Geneva, Switzerland. Luc de Pulfort, coordinator, Inter-Parliamentary Alliance in China, London, United Kingdom. Enghe Batu Togochog, directors, Southern Mongolian Human Rights Information Center, New York, United States. And Ashwini Mahajanji, national co-convener, Swadeshi Jagran Manch, New Delhi. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Kapil, Executive Committee Member of Law and Society Alliance, to introduce the host of Law and Society Alliance and Defense Capital. Mr. Kapil? Kapil, you are not audible, I think.
Yes, yeah. Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Yes. Good evening, Rahul, and good evening to all distinguished speakers, as well as all the members who are attending amazing event. Law and Society, in collaboration with Defense Capital, they are the hosts for today's event. So Law and Society Alliance is an independent Indian national growth organization providing legal knowledge intervention on issues pertaining to homeland security, human rights, national security, terrorism, narcotics, as well as legal. And is a New Delhi-based think tank which tracks the businesses as well as politics of India's growing defense maritime trade, and wanted you to provide you the most accurate as well as quality news. Now, I'd like to introduce H. Kumar Vaidyan. He is an editor and is the Secretary General of Society Alliance. As we have NC Bipindra, he is a defense, and he is also an editor of Defense Capital, Court of India and Court of Delhi, and is chairman of Law and Society Alliance.
Yeah. Thanks for your remarks and welcoming the speakers and the members of Law and Society and Defense Capital. Now, I would like to invite Mr. NC Bipindra, Chairman, Law and Society Alliance, Editor, Defense Capital, to introduce the speakers of the day and what and why of the campaign. Mr. Bipindra.
Thank you very much, Rahul, for this opportunity. Let me first introduce the anchor of Rahul Tiwari. Is a very young research scholar of Law and Society Alliance, and he's the anchor of the day. This is the first time he's anchoring as far as Law and Society Alliance event is concerned. And thank you, Rahul, for doing this. And he's also a doctorate program aspirant. He's enrolling himself for a doctorate in international relations. So I wish him all the best for that. Thank you for this opportunity, and it's my profound privilege and pleasure to introduce all the speakers of the day who are participating in this very important event, which is basically a global campaign for democratic China, uniting against the Chinese Communist Party's repressive regime. This is the topic of the day. Basically, we have chosen this topic primarily because there is already a global call for China to go democratic and end its single party communist rule, and then hold elections so that there are multi-party elections that are held, and a popular government is in place in China. And that will also provide a lot of voice to all the oppressed communities which live in the present day communist China, whether it is the Tibetans in the occupied Tibet, or the Uyghurs in the occupied East Turkestan, or the Mongolians in the occupied southern Mongolia and other, Manchuria and other places which are currently under occupation. The democracy in China will provide a voice to all others, and also equal footing for all democratic nations to engage with this hegemonic regime currently in place in China. Law and Society Alliance primarily promotes democracy and is against any authoritarian rule anywhere in the world, particularly any single rule, party rule, such as the communist government in China today. And also the kind of expansionism that China has been exhibiting under Xi Jinping at this point in time. So this is the background behind this campaign, and we are very happy that we have participation from all groups which are sort of campaigning for democracy in China today. We have very eminent personalities who are globally acclaimed and also internationally known to be voice for democracy. First, I would like to introduce Luke de Pulod. He's currently the coordinator for Interparliamentary Alliance on China. He's based in London, and he's also director of Arise Foundation. He's also the founder of Coalition for Genocide Response and a member of the Conservative Party Human Rights Commission. He has visited Hong Kong and as part of an international independent observer mission to monitor the district council elections there, and also been active in campaigning for Hong Kong in the recent months. So welcome to the event, Duke. I'm happy that you are here today. Thank you very much. We also have another speaker, Haji Syed Salman Chishti. He is the 26th generation hereditary custodian of the world-renowned Sufi shrine in Ajmer Sharif. He is also a well-known and a popular religious preacher and a leader and also a voice for human rights for Uyghurs. Globally, and we are very pleased to have him here today. He's a global personality, so we are very happy that he has taken time out to be with us today. He's also the chairman of Chishti Foundation, which is again based in Ajmer in Rajasthan in India. Thank you very much, Haji Saab, for joining today. We have Sheng Zui. She's a Canada-based poet, writer, and journalist, and the vice president of the Canadian Coalition Against Communism. She has been an active democracy activist, pro-democracy activist for the last 30 years, and has promoted multiculturalism, inter-ethnic dialogue, and reconciliation. She's an outspoken critic of this current Chinese government's human rights record, and she's also a long-term advocate for human rights and democracy in China. She is a founder of several human rights organizations and pro-democracy organizations in Canada, and is a very active voice there. So I welcome her to the event. Thank you very much. She's the women voice also in this event. Then we have Engebatu Kukuchok, who's the director of the Human Rights Information Center in New York, and is an important human rights activist and voice for the Mongolian people. May I ask everybody to keep themselves mute, please? So that the speakers are not disturbed. Request. Engebatu Tokuchok is the director of the Southern Mongolian Human Rights Information Center in New York, and is basically he is the voice for Mongolian people and also for other communities who are currently suffering under the repressive Chinese government. Tinley Chuki is from Geneva, is based in Geneva. She's the special appointee for human rights at the Tibetan Bureau there. And she has previously worked in the United Nations and European Union and at the Human Rights Desk of the Department of Information and International Relations under the Central Tibetan Administration, Dharamsala in India. She is a law graduate, master's degree holder from the Harvard Law School. She passed out from there in 2018. Chuki, thank you very much for joining. She's a very close and a dear friend. Thank you for joining, Chuki. We have Ilchat Hasan Kokbore. He's the director of the Chinese Affairs Department of the World Uyghur Congress and is an active pro-democracy and human rights activist. He is currently in exile from China, after being subjugated with a lot of government pressure. And he is best refrain, as far as I've heard, is that democratize China to ensure that freedom for all other communities, including Uyghurs in East Turkestan. We completely agree with this point of view there, and we support him in his activities. We have a very important, political activist from India, Sri Ninong Ering ji. Ninong Ering sir is basically is currently the member of a legislative assembly, the legislative unit for Arunachal Pradesh state, which apparently comes under regular and frequent aggression by China, on a yearly basis actually. So he's a very important voice there. He's a former union minister in the government of India under the previous government, and he's a very important voice as far as anti-China activism is concerned. So I welcome Ninong Ering sir. His achievements are huge. I cannot be listing all of them for lack of time, so I will just leave it here. Then our last speaker of the day is Ashwini Mahajanji, who is a professor of economics in the DAV College under the University of Delhi. He is also the national co-convener of Swadeshi Jagran Manch, which is a very popular and self-reliant economic model movement in India. So he is the national co-coordinator of that organization in India, and he is also a guide and a philosopher for several youngsters who pursue economic studies and also activism. In fact, he has championed the cause of Indian enterprise against Chinese economic onslaught in India, and he has been successful in most of his campaigns, ensuring that the government of India changes its pro-China policies on several economic fronts, including the banning of the Chinese apps in the recent times and preventing Chinese companies from hostile takeover of several Indian companies. So these are some of his achievements as far as economic activism is concerned. We welcome all of you to the event. So thank you very much for joining. I now hand over to Rahul to conduct the rest of the proceedings. Thank you very much, Rahul.
Thank you, Bhavendra sir, for introducing our distinguished guests and speakers. Now, each speaker will be given 10 minutes to speak. And here, now I would like to invite our distinguished speaker, Mr. Enge Batu Togochok, to speak over the mentioned topic. Mr. Enge Batu.
Hi, how are you? You hear me?
Yeah, we
Hear
can.
me?
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, my name is Ingbat Torchik. I'm the director of the Southern Mongolian Human Rights Information Center based in New York. I was born and raised in Southern Mongolia, and I came to the United States in 1998. And in 2001, along with other Southern Mongolian exiles in the United States, I established the Southern Mongolian Human Rights Information Center. The main goal of the SMHIC is to promote and protect the human rights of the Mongolian people in Chinese-occupied Southern Mongolia. So Southern Mongolia is widely known as Inner Mongolia, which is a direct translation of the Chinese word Nei Mongol, a highly Sino-centric terminology that conveys the message of Chinese territorial claim over this part of Mongolia. In our language, we call Southern Mongolia as Overmong, which is a simple geographical terminology, meaning southern part of Mongolia or Southern Mongolia. Unlike the deliberate Chinese translation, it has no meaning of inner whatsoever. Therefore, the Mongolians always prefer southern Mongolia over inner Mongolia. So from the territorial perspective, southern Mongolia has a vast territory of nearly 2 million square kilometers, covering the so-called Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region and Mongolian inhabited areas in neighboring Chinese provinces and historical Mongolian territory elsewhere within the borders of the People's Republic of China. From the demographic perspective, the Mongolian population of southern Mongolia is about 6 million, which is as twice as large as that of the independent country of Mongolia in the north. Southern Mongolia was officially annexed to China in 1949 and became the first so-called nationality minority autonomous region of China. Since then, Southern Mongolia has been the testing ground of China's all forms of ethnic policies, including genocide, ethnic cleansing, political purge, economic exploitation, cultural assimilation, and environmental destruction. From the 1960s through an early 1970s, the Chinese government carried out a massive genocide campaign in southern Mongolia. At least 100,000 Mongolians were killed and 500,000 persecuted. At that time, the total population of southern Mongolia was about 1.5 million. That means 1/3 of the Mongolian population was affected by this genocide campaign. In the 1980s, the Chinese government has escalated its cultural assimilation and population transferring in southern Mongolia. Millions of Chinese peasants poured into southern Mongolia and pushed the indigenous Mongolians out of their ancestral land. Starting early 2000, the Chinese government has implemented a series of new policies under which Mongolian traditional nomadic way of life was blamed for environmental degradation, which is in fact caused by the China's large-scale farming and agricultural practice. Under the pretext of recovering grassland ecosystem, these policies include ecological migration and total ban over livestock grazing to forcibly displace entire Mongolian herders from their ancestral lands to predominantly Chinese populated urban and agricultural areas. Grazing the livestock on the grassland is considered a crime, and herders who graze their livestock on their own land have been subject to fine, confiscation of livestock, arrest, detention, and imprisonment. So this is how China effectively wiped out the million-old nomadic civilization within its borders. As the final move toward the eradication of Mongolian national identity, what the government of China is implementing in southern Mongolia today is a wholesale culture genocide, aiming at the complete eradication of Mongolian culture. The official euphemism of this new round of cultural genocide is a bilingual education, which was designed to mislead the international community about China's true intention of wiping out Mongolian language, culture, and identity once and for all. In early June this year, officials from Chinese Ministry of Education visited southern Mongolia and verbally communicated the central government's decision to the local authority, educational authority, and schools, and the total secrecy of the plan and the surreptitious way it was carried out suggests the covert and genocidal nature of the campaign. Even until today, there has been no single official document from the central government on this so-called major national strategic deployment. In response to this final blow to the Mongolian culture, the entire southern Mongolian population has stood up. Starting the late August, a region-wide civil disobedience resistance movement broke out across southern Mongolia. From kindergartners to well-known intellectuals, from middle schoolers to college students, from ordinary herders to rural villagers, and from musicians, artists to taxi drivers, from government officials to party members, even some police officers of Mongolian ethnicity took part of this large-scale protests against the Chinese authorities' new round of cultural genocide. Despite the police intimidation and official propaganda, the Mongolian parents organized themselves to launch a total school boycott. Estimated 300,000 students joined the school boycott. According to some analysts, and this protest is the largest mass movement in mainland China since 1989 student movement. The level of coordination and the solidarity is unprecedented. Not only the entire Southern Mongolian population took part in this protest one way or another, but also the Mongolians around the world, including the independent country of Mongolia, Kalmyk, Buryat, Hazara, and overseas Mongolian communities have been staging protests in front of Chinese embassy and consulates in their respective countries to show their solidarity to the other Mongolians on the ground. The Chinese authorities not only refused to listen to the Mongolians to answer their legitimate demand, but also responded with excessive force and inhuman crackdown. Mass arrest and arbitrary detentions are commonplace in Southern Mongolia. And we estimated around 4,000 to 5,000 Southern Mongolians have either been arrested, detained, or placed under house arrest in the past month alone. So in addition to these, the other method of intimidation includes firing people from jobs, removing officials from positions, expelling and blacklisting students, suspending others' social benefit, and denying access to bank loans and even confiscation of their properties for their refusal to cooperate with the authorities. In response to this inhumane intimidation and official pressure, at least 11,000 Mongolians took their lives in protest of the new policy. So I believe the Southern Mongolians will continue to fight until they are free, free to use their language, free to practice their tradition, and ultimately free to determine their political future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ingibatu sir, for speaking. Now, I would like to invite our next speaker, Mr. Ilshad Hassan Kogbore, to speak over the topic.
Thank you, Mr. Rahul, and thank you, my friend. Thanks for all of your kind introduction word and also the solidarity with the Uyghur in this current Uyghur genocide. Currently, we all know it's already been a urgent topic in the whole world, include the UN and in India, US, Europe. The Chinese government rounded up a few million. Some estimate now is with the Chinese white paper, with their data, some estimate it's 8 million. With US assessment is 1 million to 3 million Uyghur was rounded up now in the concentration camp. And since 2017, whole Uyghur intellectual was rounded up and disappeared. Some was sentenced to death. And it included the top university president, professor, experts in language, culture, and some poets, writers, singers, artists, include all whole Uyghurs' cultural backbone as intellectual. And also, they are the Chinese government under the international pressure now diverting this concentration camp hold Uyghurs to do the forced labor in the brand industry. For example, the textile and others. As a proof, I can give my personal. Just 2 weeks ago, I heard two of my sister is in a concentration camp with their daughters, husbands, whole family, and they were separated in different cells. One of my sister, few times when she passed out because of the malnutrition, because of the cruelty, and when her husband, other sisters, and daughters tried to help her, the police beating them, separating them in force. So this is a horrible, the Holocaust repeating again. And the United Nations, when it set up in after Second World War, it promised never again. But this is happening again. Happening again. Today is the so-called People's Republic of China's funding for 71 years anniversary. They are celebrating their success, but this success comes with tens of thousands of Uyghur, Tibetan, Mongolian, Chinese blood. Since 1949, the Chinese government banned the newspaper, banned the books, arrested the intellectuals in China, in Tibet, in East Turkestan, in Mongolia, southern Mongolia. And they started a bloody crackdown on anyone who disagree with them. And this evil empire immediately also started a war with the free world. Let's look back. Korean War and the Vietnam War. And also, they started expansionism with the war with border neighbors. Actually, India wasn't the Chinese neighbor, but because of China occupied East Turkestan and Tibet, it becomes the neighbor of India. And started war with India and with Soviet Russian and with Vietnam and some other in the neighbors. And some proxy war in Southeast Asia, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in Philippines. I'm recalling this event just to remind the world this is an evil empire. Its evilness, its bloodiness, not only limited inside the Chinese border or the controlled territory. China, East Turkestan, Tibetan is stretching their arms to the world. They are exporting this cruel brutality, tyranny to all over the world, to other dictatorship countries. And they are infiltrating US, Europe, India, and other countries. They try to control all the resource and with the ambition of dominate the world. This is a danger we are facing. We didn't recognize it in 1949. We were naively, especially some politicians, naively believed the Chinese communist is different with Russian communist or Soviet communist. They naively think the communist is different with fascist or Nazism, but actually they are all same. They are all a disaster for humanity, for the civilization. Now, even though it's too late, but still the world waking up. United States, Europe, and India. Because it's too late. We need to come together. If one by one, the Chinese communist regime still manipulating. So we need to come together to fight with this evil empire, to destroy, defeat this evil ideology, to free all the oppressed people, occupy the land, to get rid of this evil ideology, give the humanity, give the civilization a power, to empower all oppressed, occupied lands people so we can come together to live a harmonious, prosperous life. That requires, again, we come together. I'm very grateful to the Indian friend, all NGO organization, especially the Law and Order Society. Special thanks also to my friend Bipandra and all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for speaking. Now, may I please request Haji Sayyid Salman Chishti of Admission Sharif to speak over the topic. Mr. Haji Sayyid.
Greeting of peace, adab, namaste. Our best regards to all the participants here. Very, very important panelists here. Law, society, defense capital, and all the partners here. At this moment where I won't say it's a geopolitical situation, but I would say that certain acts of defiance of a parallel and a balanced worldview is not affecting the immediate neighbors, the citizen itself, but also the globe and the world at large. I was hearing to Mr. Ilshad Hassan Kokbar about their own personal experiences, very unfortunate experiences, as well as the effect on the neighboring countries, not from the recent aggression, but for a series of policies, acts, and defiance of international law system, international borders, disrespectful conduct to the international political understanding with the world leaders when it comes to China and its subversive, oppressive policies towards its own citizens who have been always looking for a fair and a balanced way of life to live. But unfortunately, that has not come to light yet. The Uyghurs and their plight is known around the world. We don't have to re-emphasize on that plight and the suppression that they have been going through. In the recent time, and as our neighbor, China has always disregarded and disrespected the concerns and the implications of aggression. As India is a land of peace. And with this peace is not only for us Indian, but also for the world. That is why for centuries, we have always been known as the Vishwa Guru, the global teachers of spiritual understanding, a way of life. Centuries after centuries, our saints and scholars, sages, the stories from our land have paved a way throughout the world to respect human dignity, equality, uphold justice, which unfortunately our neighbor, China specifically, have not been able to uphold. With this forum, as we heard about the current ongoing suppressions and large perspective of human right violations, violating the international border laws, and also their own citizens being under deep suppression. We call for the world leaders, and especially the world bodies like the United Nations, to re-emphasize their perspective, because when such global bodies and the global leaders are meeting and coming together and forming policies for a balanced approach towards our world in today's time, and if the results on grounds are not to be seen, there are many days, international days of peace, of justice, which have been initiated by India at the UN and different countries who have come together from time to time. But when those realistic approach of the spirit of those days is not to be seen in the member state, I think that's a real concern. I had an experience of visiting China about 5 years back. That was my first and the only experience where I traveled to some of the central China parts of the Han dynasty, primarily the Muslim community of the Han dynasty. We had some conferences, organized some academic conferences at the Harvard Beijing Center. We were in Guangzhou, and then we were in the central China, the cities of Zhengzhou, Lanzhou. We had interaction with a lot of young students at the campuses when I was there, especially in terms of creative aspect. And throughout the dialogue, there was a kind of a struggle of even to speak up or the situation which they were going on and living through. As China has kept itself very secretively, despite the world, as we know, from Indian perspective, it's a global village that we share each other concerns. And 5 years back, as soon as you land up in China, everything that you are connected with the world, with your social media, whether it is Facebook, whether it is Twitter or anything, or even Google, anything that you connect, it gets jammed. Automatically, it gets disabled. And you are not able to communicate to the rest of the world. This is, I'm talking about in the 21st century, where we are talking about global connectivity, global village, digital revolution. And yet, even now, which China claim to be that they are kind of revolutionary in digital applications and the market that they want to have their presence, but yet within their own land, everything becomes blocked up automatically. So these kind of concern, there's the sense of secrecy will never be able to, where the world will never be able to understand what really is going on in the land of China. Even today, even if you write on, if you go on Google or any apps which are available to public access, if you want to know the ground realities, what is happening, nothing will be found. So that's kind of a whole, you can say, a block which has been created to access of information, sharing of information, where I think the global leaders should push through this blockade so that common people, their concerns and their own citizens who have been under suppression can be shared, and a dialogue can be open, a discussion can be open on the government level, on the security level, on the defense level, and also on the common people level, where they can interact with each other. These are very real concerns. The news that always come during the month of Ramzan, that they have not been able to give freedom of even fasting. The Uyghur community, they have not been able to observe their faith perspective. Every year, it's not something one time. Every time when some events like that happen, some suppressed news comes across with no clarity. So these concerns must be addressed, of course, in the platform that we are together. There are many intellectual thinkers and activists who have been vocal about it for for almost a couple of decades, as I've been reading some of the profiles. And unfortunately, they all have been the common thing about all these activists, that they are all have been in exile. There are no activists who are present at the China at this time when we are talking. So what are these concerns that no dissent voices or those activists who've been very vocal, they have to leave the country, they have to leave China, go to some other country, and then become a visible face or the face of that movement, or the voice against suppression and of the communities and the different people in the different lands, different zones or different states of China, central or where we call it's the northern parts, or the situation that we hear right now. So we pray from Ajmer Dargah Sharif from India, our best regards and our prayers, and also our voices are with them standing always, with the Tibetan people, with the Mongolians, with all the surrounding neighbors who have been affected brutally. It is a brutal effect which is coming to in today's time, and I think that the world must speak up. A few countries have started speaking up. India has spoken openly about the border aggression, which is totally unjust and not acceptable by 1.3 billion people of India, the citizens of India, our government, our leadership. And so it should not be acceptable to the world any aggression of this kind. With this remarks, and we hope to continue these kind of conversations on such platforms and strongly put the resistance in perspective, and the top leadership, even in the Chinese administration, should be able to hear these echoes of justice, righteousness, equality, and of their own citizen that the world is concerned of. Regards and blessings from Ajmer Dargah Sharif. Thank you, Bipinder Saab and all the team here at Law and Defense Capital. Our regards and duas always. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Sayyid Salman sir. You have shared your views very explicitly and defined the very concept of India as the world is one, that is Vasudha Kutumbakam. Now I would like to invite our next speaker, Shengzu. Mr. Shengzu.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you, everybody. So good morning, good noon, good afternoon, good evening. I'm in Mississauga, Canada.
Sorry to interrupt you. We are not able to see your video. Is it possible for you to just switch it on?
Okay. Yep. Can you see me now?
Yes, we can see you now. Please carry
All
on.
right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, I am in Mississauga, Canada, just west of Toronto. There is a virus haunting the world. So by this morning, I just checked. There are 215 countries are affected. 34 million and 206,915 people were infected by the virus, and 1,019,629 people died. United States is number 1 and India is number 2. And moreover, I think a complete number should be much higher. It caused a huge amount of deaths and endless suffering. Many of us already know that this is the CCP virus. It has infected all of our lives. Wherever the CCP virus goes, it takes away human lives, freedom, love, work, and even enjoyment, and makes people feel bored, confused, impatient, angry, and mistrustful of each other. We don't know when this terrible virus will disappear. However, we already know that the human lifestyle won't be able to go back to the normal. It appeared in Wuhan, China last year, but that was just another outbreak of the CCP virus. The real CCP virus was the birth of the Chinese Communist Party about a century ago. So the whole world has ignored the CCP crimes against humanity for too long time, especially because of the CCP became more rich for the last 20-some years. The whole world has accepted it burning down churches and temples, killing people to steal their organs, and sent millions of Uyghurs and other Muslims to concentration camps. The world is helpless when more than 150 Tibetans had to use self-immolation to protest the CCP. After CCP began its massacre in Hong Kong last year, many countries have expressed their anger, but still not much the world can do. Due to my family background, I have learned about the evil of CCP since my childhood. I witnessed the Tiananmen massacre in June in 1989 again. So I left China and came to Canada 2 months later. I immediately participated in activities against the CCP in Canada. I wrote articles, published books, and interviewed by medias, and gave speeches to schools and gatherings, meetings. And I established some organizations, initiated activities, lobbied Congress and the governments, and conducted humanitarian projects. So I tried to do everything I could think of. And of course, I have been on the blacklist and denied my rights to go back to my hometown for 21 years, more than 21 years now. And I become the enemy of the state, the tyranny state. 18 years ago, I wrote an article of more than 10,000 Chinese characters to argue that the CCP is the tyranny of state terrorism. Many people didn't agree with me, and they said that I was too impatient. And they said the CCP's policy was very good to give people a chance to make a lot of money. And even people think I was crazy. But for now, those people who didn't agree, they may already in jail. And they think I was crazy. They might be on the way to run away from China. And also those people, they think that they could make a lot of money under the Chinese policy. They probably in prison or lost their lives. And Xi Jinping is a very arrogant, cruel, and stupid leader. He made the situation worse and worse, but he offended people more and more. So we are going to have a chance for the first big chance for the 70 years. And I said many times during conferences, the situation for repressed people such as the Uyghurs, Mongolians, and the Tibetans are worse than in a war. Since they cannot fight back, they have no weapons, even nothing, even not tools to fight back to the tyranny. And in the international community, there are a lot of people didn't believe. They think China is a peaceful country and it's a rich state. So they cannot see the situation for Uyghurs, Tibetans, Mongolians, and the grass people, Chinese people in China. And for the breakout of this virus, there is a little chance for the world to really see the situation in China. And the conflict between China and India made the world to see the weakness of the CCP. As a responsible democratic country, India should join force with other Asian countries such as Japan and Taiwan to resist the CCP together. Anyway, it's been already too late. People in China have paid too much price, and the world is paying the price now. As I said in an article published in the British Daily Mail in April this year, the world must come together to defeat the disease from Wuhan, but then it must stay united to beat another evil. We are not just confronting coronavirus at this moment in history, but the even deadlier Communist Party virus. Old cost in this world due to the CCP virus must be exchanged for at least one result, which is to end the CCP's tyranny as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sue, and thanks for sharing your views regarding the recent pandemic and enlightening us about the CCP. Now, I would like to invite our next speaker, Tinle Chuki.
Rahul, am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much, Rahul. At the outset, I would like to thank Bipindraji, the Law and Society team, and the Defense Capital for organizing this timely webinar on such an important topic of repressive policies of the Chinese Communist Party, and also for inviting me to speak on behalf of the Tibetans. A very good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the viewers and also my co-panelists. I think today I would like to focus on three important aspects. That is, firstly, I would want to give a very brief overview about what is happening inside Tibet, especially the kind of human rights violations that is happening. And secondly, an introduction on how the history is repeating itself when it comes to the ethnic minorities, the so-called ethnic minorities by China, and also on how China is not just a threat to the occupied territories, but also to the entire world, the global peace and stability. So as the speakers before me have said, today China is celebrating the 71st anniversary of the formation of People's Republic of China. Generally, when a revolution succeeds and a new country is formed, it brings a lot of joy to the people. However, the formation of People's Republic of China under the authoritarian Chinese Communist Party regime has unleashed unending misery on the Tibetans. It has killed 1.2 million Tibetans, destroyed over 6,000 monasteries. It has damaged the fragile ecosystem, the environment of Tibet, which is the roof of the world. And also, the entire population of Tibetans are subjected to total sinicization. with the sole objective of obliterating their identities as Tibetans. So this, I think, is very important to note, that the very basis of the PRC, the People's Republic of China, is occupation. It has occupied the territories, the countries. Tibet has a rich history of being an independent country, and it was never a part of China, but now it is. And interestingly, the PRC forms the territory of the current PRC is only 1/5 of the entire territory. So Southern Mongolia, as panelists have said before, Southern Mongolia, East Turkestan, Tibet, which has now been divided into many territories, and Manchuria. So all these territories are occupied. So the entire basis of the PRC is destruction of territorial integrity of these countries. And I think that is very important to remember. Moving on the human rights situation, I think when I speak about Tibetans, you will feel that I am replicating or repeating what appears to have happened to the Southern Mongolians, what is currently happening to the Uyghurs, because this is the modus operandi of Chinese Communist Party. They'll come to you with the promises of development, prosperity, and so-called peace and tranquility, but they will occupy you, and then they will bring the entire destruction of the country and the entire destruction of the identities of the people that have been occupied. So very recently, there is a report by the Jamestown Foundation, which clearly, said how our concerns when it comes to Tibetans, because that report clearly shows that over 500,000 Tibetans inside the so-called Tibet Autonomous Region are being to militarized forced labor. The entire militarization of these forced labor camps is very Xinjiang style, or very, how Tibetans, how the Uyghur Muslims are being put under the concentration camps. It is very similar to that. And the entire objective of this so-called labor camps, or, they might start calling it as vocational training centers, this is only to ensure that the entire population of Tibetans are totally subjugated to the Chinese Communist Party regime, and that the Tibetans lose the identity of who they are through the cultural genocide. So this is very important. And also to note that these the people who have been subjected to these forced militarized labor camps are predominantly from the rural area and the nomads. So, in the name of poverty alleviation, first of all, the Chinese Communist Party regime ensures that the self-sustained, self-sufficient, and sustainable lifestyle of the Tibetans is destroyed by confiscating their land, by forced resettlement of the nomads, and then they are made so poor that they have to depend on the welfare benefits of China, and thereby, through these welfare benefits, they control the entire population. So this is the modus operandi, as my friend and co-panelist Enki Batugla also said, that this has been followed in Southern Mongolia as well. And when it comes to other violations, I think, I have already said in my previous talk as well that there is no human rights left under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights which has not been violated when it comes to Tibetans, be it freedom of religion, freedom of expression, right against torture. Tibetans are continuously arrested for as simple as raising complaint that the authority is corrupt, or that somebody is not fulfilling their duty. This is the situation. They are subjected to arbitrary detention for a long period of time. Nobody knows where they are. They do not have a right to a fair trial. And, coincidentally, if they do get a trial, then they do not even have access to lawyers. And then they are put under long sentences, and nobody knows where they are jailed for a long period of time. So this is the current situation of Tibetans inside Tibet. And when I say about how history is repeating itself, look at what is happening at Hong Kong. The joint declaration by the British and the Chinese Communist Party with the Chinese government, that was breached by the Chinese Communist Party and the government. And everybody was surprised. But trust me, I think Tibetans were not surprised because this has happened to the Tibetans. Way back in 1951, the Chinese authorities forced the Tibetans to sign a 17-point agreement in April. And that agreement was signed at the gunpoint. And then later on, China itself reneged on the agreement. They themselves breached the agreement, forcing His Holiness the Dalai Lama and thousands of Tibetans to flee Tibet, to escape Tibet and seek refuge in India. This is the condition. So history is repeating itself also because you look at what happened in the Tiananmen Square massacre. This had already happened in Tibet. 1959, 10th March, the first Tibetan uprising. Thousands of Tibetans were killed. The Lhasa was filled with bloods of Tibetans who were crushed by the Chinese Liberation Army, the People's Liberation Army of China. So you see that the history is repeating itself. Now, when I say China is threat, I say it because, as speakers before me have said, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The world is one big family. But when China looks at the world, it sees the world as one big colony. It only thinks about how to colonize the countries, how to colonize new territories. What is happening in Sri Lanka with Hambantota port? What is happening with Pakistan? What is happening with Myanmar? What is happening in South China Sea? It's the same thing. They want to colonize the world. The Belt and Road Initiative is nothing but a weapon, a strategy which is clearly aimed at colonizing the world. And again, I say this with a lot of experience from the Tibetan end. The first road that was ever built by the Chinese Communist Party was to Lhasa, the capital of Tibet. And look what happened to Tibet. It is an occupied territory. Wherever this Belt and Road strategy or the Belt and Road Initiative goes, trust me, people are going to be made to be dependent. The policy that is being employed within Tibet, in southern Mongolia, in East Turkestan is just that. First, they are going to make you dependent on them, and then they are going to exploit you. If you look at what is happening with all the trades and the business transactions with so many powerful countries, they are made to be dependent on the trade. They promised a lot of money, and now they are making them dependent. So a lot of countries, even at the United Nations, are not able to speak against China because now their economy is linked to the Communist Party regime. So with this, I would want to end my presentation with a very simple appeal that it is time for the world to unite. We might think about, the Southern Mongolians, the Uyghurs, the Tibetans, the Hong Kongers should unite. Of course, we will unite. But it is time that the world unite the countries which believe in democracy, freedom, and peace to join forces. Otherwise, it will be too late. And when it comes to China, please be ready to expect the worst. And then you will be surprised how much more worse they can go. And this is with the Tibetan experience that we are saying. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tinde. It is our pleasure to hear you again regarding the PRC's greed for territory and expansionism. And nowadays, the picture is becoming crystal clear for all of us. Now, I would like to invite our next speaker, Ninong Ering. Ninong Ering, sir, can you?
Namaskar and Jai Hind. I think that will cover up for all good mornings and good evenings. So I'm very privileged to be with a host of speakers and especially to the Law and Society Alliance and the Defense Capital, and especially Rahul Tiwari ji, and how you are organizing this. It's really it's great that we could all come together and speak of such an important issue. Of course, first of all, I would like to express my pleasure in speaking this event, which has brought to many prominent who have displayed their courage and resilience to fight the CCP. Many of them have dedicated their entire life, like some of the speakers have just said. I'm really, honored to be with them. It has really touched my heart also. Of course, I'd like to applaud the initiative of the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China, the IPAC. The foundation of the initiative highlights that the world has now realized that they are all coming together on all democracies is indeed to tackle China. It gives me immense pleasure to see parliamentarians from vibrant democracies of the world in a common goal, with a common goal, in a common platform, and challenging the biggest threat that the world is facing. I believe that such an initiative shall, indeed be welcome in India and also by our society. And of course, the world also will accept it. But when you refer to China and India, you'll see the cultures were, long time back. The most ancient living cultures were, both China and India have an incredibly long and interesting histories. These two countries are members of the world's 4 ancient civilizations, along with Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt. Many travelers from China, including Yunsang and Fahain, had documented about India. In the ancient times, that had been adopted in their art, technology, and philosophy. Religion has been an important part of history of both China and India. Even though most Chinese people do not belong to faith, many still practice traditional religious rituals in their daily lives. Chinese people often believe broadly in prayers of ancestors, just like in India and especially in Arunachal. So, of course, we have our own festivals also, like we can take in Holi or Diwali or the Chinese New Year. How they have this. We have we celebrate with crackers. We celebrate with with dhumdham se manate, with joy and pomp. And China also has that celebration in the Chinese New Year. Besides cultural similarities in Buddhism, yoga, India and China, or territories occupied by it, there are numerous geographical connections. And the cycle of monsoon that brings rains to India is linked to the Tibetan plateau, as to the culture, besides the mighty river Brahmaputra in the northeast of India, that originates from China. We have a border, especially Arunachal Pradesh, has a border of more than 1,200 kilometers. And we should not forget, very big contributions from India. Of course, we had Dr. G.S. Kotnis, who was also known as in his Chinese name as Dr. Qi Diho, one of the 5 Indian physicians dispatched to China to provide medical assistance during the Second Sino-Chinese-Japanese War in 1938. Known for his dedication and preservation, he has been, regarded as an example for Sino-Indian friendship and collaboration. He is still considered as Messiah by the Chinese society. And in fact, we also, in India, also have a lot of, Chinese friends, Chinese community, especially in Calcutta. I know a certain family, which we were there not now, way back in 1962, after the Chinese war. Of course, the Chinese very much doubted that time, but they had good Chinese. We have good Chinese. And it was, in fact, one of my very uncles were there, Mr. Weil Chen. So he was in tannery. He was in the, kind of shoe business. The chemistry of the people of these two countries is close to each other without being similar to each other. We have chinky eyes. The mainland people have long nose, big eyes, but we have flat noses. But there has been a culture. People from both countries respect family and treasures sincerely. Kinship structures are almost identical to both countries. Both share a deep love of their land and culture. And that is why, the Indo-Chinese relations have been very strong. The point that I'm trying to highlight is that both the countries are very strongly connected in social, historical, and cultural terms. However, they also face a common challenge, which is the CCP. The Communist Party of China is an, antithesis to the ideas of India's pluralistic democracy. You see our secularism, you see our democracy. There's a vast difference. Let me elaborate this fact that with my experience, the constituency in the East Arunachal, from where I have been an MP, that I used to represent as a parliamentarian, was a massive, we have a long boundary. Especially in a place like in Gale, every now and then we see, intruders, or not exactly intruders, but infiltrators who come from China. And then when we hand them over to the police personals or to the authorities, they plead that they don't want to go back to China. The stories of their sufferings, their stories of, that communist regime, it is, really the PLA soldiers, it speaks for themselves. They also highlight that India offers an opposite model in CCP, a model that Chinese people aspire to get. But in India, when they come down and see the system, the democracy that we have, they don't like to stay under this regime. The need of people for the movement against China. I urge all trade unions of the world to come together to constitute an alliance for fighting China, similar to the IPAC. China works under the garb of the people's movement, arguing to fight for laborers and farmers, which is just the opposite, like as the previous the previous speakers have already spoken. I would like to utilize the platform for urging all the trade unions and farmer organizations to form similar alliances, to bringing together associations from all over. So this way, we have to stick together. I'm sure that India is taking a very major part. The idea is to turn this movement into a people's movement by involving people from all over the world. This model of IPAC shall be replicated in every field of the world. Let us not forget that till CCP is in power, the world is under threat. Buddhism is the important link between both the nations of Tibet and of India, which the CCP is trying to destroy. Look at the conditions of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. Look at what China had done to him and Tibet. China had started encroaching land and territorial waters of several, like, was it? Yes, like Thinle Chukki had just referred. The movement of democracy in China is, we have to say Buddhism. My state, Arunachal Pradesh, is a major Buddhist center, especially Tawang. Tawang also happens to be the birthplace of, in 1683, we had the 6th Dalai Lama, and it was the center of one of the Tibetan Buddhism. China has been claiming that Tawang belonged to Tibet, but as you know that Arunachal Pradesh was during that time Nepal. It was part and parcel of India, and we still maintain the McMahon line, which China does not agree. It is one of the few monasteries of Tibetan Buddhism that have remained protected from Mao's revolution without any damage, because that was in Nepal and Arunachal Pradesh. Before the war in 1959, the 14th Dalai Lama had to flee from Tibet and come through Tawang. And he came to India 30th March 1959. And from there he was taken to the, from that monastery, he was taken down to Tezpur, and then where he has been now settled in Dharamshala. India to take leverage of the Buddhist connection and should support the liberation movement of Tibet. we still, my chief minister, Mr. Pema Khandu, still says that we do not have a border with China, but we have border with Tibet, because we still recognize Tibet as a sovereign country. China plans that the next Dalai Lama's, it should be from Beijing. It should be appointed from Beijing, his successor. Of course, the Dalai Lama has said that should not happen. It should be outside of Tibet, which is now the erstwhile Tibet, which is now under China. In fact, we should see that the Dalai Lama should come out from India, either in Himachal or in Arunachal Pradesh, say in Tawang or in Namsai, where we have the Buddhists, we have the gurus, we have the Buddhist monks. So one, his successor could have been from Tawang or Namsai, and that is, of course, he must be appointed as a 15th Dalai Lama. Due to the restrictions on media and Chinese propaganda covering the everyday lives of Chinese citizens, it is difficult for the democratic movement to rep at once in China. So the Chinese who are now throughout the world, I've just heard Madam Chuki, I've heard Zhu Shang, and the problems and difficulties they had faced. Now the democratic defenders shall come together to start this movement everywhere in the world, and then ensure that it reaches China. I was a young politician. That time I was just an MLA in 1989 when the Tiananmen Square protest took place. I was very impressed with the courage and the commitment displayed by the youngsters of China for democracy. Of course, we need to ensure that more and more democratic protests like this take place within China, and shall collectively support with one voice that speaks about the democracy in China. The idea that the democracy project is dead and buried in China is far-fetched, as earlier expectations of a smooth sailing democratic revolution, very soon democracy shall reappear on the list of things that ordinary citizens can openly care about and peacefully strive for. Indeed, the present leadership may be the last one capable of governing China with a reasonable degree of authority and stability in the absence of democratization. I talked to many politicians and representatives and share strong friendship with a number of leaders across parties. In fact, I was a member in the Indo-Tibetan Parliamentarians Forum, and we had a lot of discussions. In fact, we even traveled to other countries also and discussed with other, parliamentarians. And we had always discussed about the atrocities of China to its neighboring country, the way of the territorial, colonization they have done throughout its neighboring countries. So I would like to reiterate the fact that despite difference of domestic policy issues, Indian leaderships and the political community is of a common line on its Chinese policy. India has hundreds of political parties, and all of them stand together on India's Chinese policy and support establishment of democracy in China. Representing the voices of all of them, I express the support of India to the global campaign for democratic China. We are always ready to extend our support to all of you and help in whichever we can within India and elsewhere in the world. Thank you and Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, sir. You have very profoundly connected the common angle of religious and cultural values and the common challenges that is PRC and CCP, and not the Chinese people. Now, I would like to invite our next speaker, Luke De Pulford, to speak over the topic. Yeah, Luke, you are audible. Luke, I think you are not audible. Yeah, now it's fine. No. Can anybody else hear him? Luke, you are not audible. Can you please, I think setting problem will be there. I think there are some technical issues. Luke,
Rahul, you can call the next speaker, Ashwini Majanji. I'll speak to
Okay.
Luke and find out
Sure.
what is the difficulty. No? Yeah.
Sure, sir. Now I would like to invite our next speaker, Ashwin Mahajanji. Sir, please.
Thank you, Rahul. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Pretty audible.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can hear you, sir.
Thank you, Rahul. In fact, it's my privilege to be with the panelists, those who have really enlightened on the issues at hand, and they have underlined the importance of. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, in fact, it's my pleasure to be with this esteemed panel. In fact, all the panelists have underlined the importance of bringing in the democracy in India, in China, and at the same see in this is not for anything else except the world peace and the welfare of the Chinese people, those who are being oppressed by the present regime. In fact,
I don't think he is clear at all. I think he's just the
let me change my. So bear with me. So, am I audible now?
much better.
So, what I was saying that this democratization of China, bringing in democracy in China, is not important from the from any other angle. It is important for the world peace. It is important for the welfare of the Chinese people. If we look back, the India and China had very good relations, and this has been going on for centuries. The difference has come only with the Communist Party of China's regime, when the whole idea of the ruling regime had become the expansion, and it has given rise to the global disharmony so far as the China is concerned, and they have created a lot of issues not only with their neighbors but even the far off countries. I would like to really talk about the economics part of it, and then we can come back to how can we really make China behave. In fact, right from the very beginning, when this regime came, they had been expansionist. We have seen 1962. We have seen their oppression, repressive activities in their own country and with the neighboring countries of China. But the kind of economic power they have gained is after 2001. I always count it because it was the membership of China in WTO which has made all the difference. In fact, they took the membership of WTO uh, with the kind of conspiracy, and they in fact have conspired against the whole world. They understood that WTO is a rule-based trading system, and they knew that market economy. They know that there is a total lack of transparency in their policy making and in their economic functioning, and they took advantage of the both and started subsidizing their exports, started dumping goods elsewhere in the other parts of the world, and that led to deindustrialization of almost all the trading partners of China. It led to deindustrialization of US, deindustrialization of Europe, deindustrialization even of India and many other countries. The only countries which were benefited, they were the partners of China in their global value chain system. But the kind of trading regime they brought in ultimately led to the deindustrialization of all these countries. And China had trade surplus with more than 130 countries, which gave them a huge power of foreign exchange reserves, which went up to $4,000 billion, $4 trillion. And that, in fact, changed the whole balance, the power balance in the world. In fact, my previous panelist was referring to the kind of economic clout China has got, which is restraining the best of the countries even to stand against Chinese policies. And in fact, for the first time, it was US under President Trump's regime that they challenged the Chinese hegemony and started imposing higher tariffs on Chinese products, what the word calls the trade war. In fact, the dumping by Chinese which has was facilitated by the policies of governments. If you see uh, the countries like US, European countries, nobody even bothered that their industries are going down because of China. And even in India, we have seen the UPA regime during which between 2004 and 2014, there has been a 3,000% increase in imports from China, but uh, no effort was made to really balance that trade. And ultimately, we know our trade balance with China increased to $63 billion by 2017-18. And in 2018-19, it went down a little bit. And in 2019-20, again, it went down a little bit. But we must understand that China is not only in the legal trade, a lot of illegal trade, lot of under invoicing in all everything, you see. And that if we count that, is this trade imbalance is no less than the double of what official imbalance is. And this is throughout the world. And as with the kind of reserves which China really gathered, 4,000 billion dollars of reserves which they collected, uh, that gave huge enormous power to China to buy out lands in and other resources in Africa, and roll out a mega infrastructure plan in the name of Belt Road Initiative. In fact, I had been looking at this Belt Road Initiative and the Chinese aggression right from the very beginning. In fact, 10 years ago, I wrote a piece that Chinese bubble may bust. The reason why I said that, because the economic principles on which the trade actually happens, the China has been going against it. In fact, they were subsidizing their exports. As a result of that, they were having huge deficits in their provincial and in their federal budgets. And as we have seen, the, the debts have increased manifold in China, and that is a very big problem. And at the same time, the inflation in China, because nobody knows what is happening in China, but the indications are coming. Why we say that there has been a lot of inflation in China, because the wage rates in China had been increasing at a very fast rate. In fact, that resulted into the fact that China was no longer you know, a cheap labor economy. But by that time, China had already occupied and already captured the world markets, and it was very difficult for the nations to come out of the clutches of China. But as a matter of fact, no country before President Trump ever tried to reduce that dependence, and that gave a kind of indication to other countries as well. And at the same time, there has been a strong movement against China because of the decline of industry in India. Swadeshi Jaganmanch, to whom which I belong, uh, uh, mm, we started this movement sometime in 2015, and in 2017 we you know uh, took it to a greater height. And in 2017 there was a big rally in Delhi against China, and it was for the first time that in the history of independent India that mm, such a big rally took place against a particular country's trade. And in fact, that led to a change in the mindset of the government as well. And you will see that you see in 2018 budget, the government of India announced protective tariffs. And basically that was to protect the domestic industry from the Chinese imports. And we imposed tariffs first of all on electronics and mobile phones, and then on textiles, and then again on textile. And then in October we imposed tariffs on the non-essential commodities, higher tariffs. And ultimately that got reflected into the decline in the trade deficit from China, because trade deficit, which has been increasing every year by $10 billion, it now
was down by $10 billion in just 1 year, from $63 billion to $53 billion in 2018-19, and then into $48 billion in 1920, and so on. So, in fact, that was very much required that the governments, try to stop Chinese imports and safeguard the interest of the Indian industry. And elsewhere, the other countries' government should safeguard their own interests against China. In fact, this is very unfortunate, but as a matter of fact, this has the pandemic which has occurred in the world. It has also given us a kind of an indication that this kind of dependence on China has been ruining the world in terms of the decline in their industry and so on. Therefore, we must do something. And SJM had been, advocating with the government that we should not go ahead with the Huawei 5G. But even then, some sections in the government, they continued with it, and even they allowed the trials to happen. But after, and even if you see, though US was in no case ready to budge, and they had shown the outgate to Huawei and other Chinese companies, but UK, disregarding the advice from US, they went ahead with the Huawei. But after the pandemic, after the Prime Minister, getting infected with Corona, the next thing after coming out from the hospital he did was that he broke the contract with the Huawei company. So we see that a lot of uprise is there against China in the world, and in fact there are some people, those who say that what can you do? India is a small country. You have hardly 2.5% of the total exports of China. How can you impact China? I always say that though we are 2.5% of the Chinese imports, but at the same time, we must not forget that we are 11.5% of the Chinese surplus. Our deficit in trade is providing 11.5% of the surplus of Chinese trade. And 85% of the surplus of Chinese trade comes from US. Out of $430 billion of Chinese surplus, $360 billion comes from US itself. So both these countries together can impact 95% of the total. It is not 85%, it is 83.5% and 11.5% from our side. And total comes to 95% of the total Chinese surplus. Total Chinese surplus will vanish once these two countries join hands. And it's not only that we join hands in pushing out China from our markets.
So may I please request you to conclude?
Yeah.
Because
So my last point would be that we have seen enough enough of China in terms of economics. Then if you see the Belt Road Initiative of China, the way China has been, mm, engaging in the debt trap diplomacy, the way they have indebted the countries like Pakistan, Sri Lanka, many of the African countries, and I have listed about, time doesn't allow, I have listed around 10 countries which are under huge debt from China. And this is the way they are trying to now impact the global order. But the opportunity now has come. The whole world is now standing against China. And this is the time when we can attack Chinese economy on the one hand and Chinese hegemony on the other, and all countries joining hands militarily, economically, and in a diplomatic fashion, we can definitely give a kind of boost to the Chinese people, those who are oppressed, repressed, to fight for their rights. And that would be the final victory of the human race in the present century. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashwini-ji. It was quite different perspective that you have brought in. And it's an honor for all of us to hear the PRC's conspiracy with the world. Now, I would like to invite Luke J. Pulford to speak over here.
So let me just test the audio. Can you all hear me this time?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly, and we can see you also. Luke, please carry on. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Okay, thank you. All right. Good evening, everybody. Good evening to those in India. Good morning to those, I think, calling from the US. Happy Mid-Autumn Festival for anybody who is celebrating it. It is a privilege to speak amongst such a distinguished panel, which includes some of my personal heroes, and a special thank you to the organisers and the Law and Defence Capital think tank. May I also say at the outset that it is extremely encouraging to see such an awakening in India about the threats posed by the Chinese Communist Party. I've been asked to speak about the importance of bringing democratic nations together to confront pressures of the Chinese Communist Party on the international rules-based system. And I think the reason I've been invited is that I founded and coordinate something called the Interparliamentary Alliance on China, IPAC, which has been mentioned a number of times by other speakers. So here's what I'm going to do in this short presentation. First, I want to lay down a few predicates. The first of those is this: the human rights order and rules-based order, more generally, are the common custody of all free nations. They are not the property of any one country. That's the first predicate. The second, the defense of the rules-based order is the common responsibility of all free nations. Defending it cannot be left to a single country. That's the second. Third, the rules-based order has come under increasing threat from the People's Republic of China, so-called, or what we should call the Chinese Communist Party. All right, so the first, the human rights order is the common custody of all nations. The second, defense of that is the common responsibility of all nations. And third, it's come under serious threat from the Chinese Communist Party. So let's follow this logic. We have no choice but to come together if we wish to maintain the integrity of the rules-based system in the face of threats from the Chinese Communist Party. This is the motivation for the Interparliamentary Alliance on China, which I co-founded and coordinate. It's a non-partisan international effort to maintain the integrity of the international and human rights orders in the face of what we see as increasing pressure from the PRC. But what kind of pressure are we talking about? Well, first of all, human rights. You know, the international order, which is being, I would go as far as to say, dismantled, demolished by the Chinese Communist Party, and many of the human rights abuses that have been perpetrated by the CCP have been mentioned already, but I'm going to list them. First of all, suspected mass atrocities in the Uyghur region against Turkic Muslim and other ethnic and religious minorities there. We now know that what is happening there meets at least two of the grounds for suspected genocide, and all that's really required is a tribunal to establish that that is the intent of the Chinese Communist Party in order to have that legal finding. This is extremely serious, and until now, the international community has more or less sat on its hands and watched it happen. In Hong Kong, as has been mentioned already, we've seen the Chinese Communist Party completely destroy an international treaty, at least one international treaty, which was lodged at the United Nations. Flagrant disregard for it, and flagrant disregard for their own promises made to the people of Hong Kong. Tibet, you've heard very eloquently spoken about already. I don't have anything to add to that magnificent presentation other than to say that that report that was mentioned, the recent report about forced labor in the Tibetan region, That was co-published by IPAC, and one of our advisors, Professor Adrian Zenz, was the person who did it. And the final thing, and this is not exhausting the list at all, Falun Gong practitioners and state-sponsored forced organ harvesting, which has been happening against them. I'm not even mentioning other ethnic and religious minorities who are suffering under China. And you've also heard from the superb presentation about what's happening to Mongolians within China. So these are just some of the human rights violations that would be on the charge sheet laid against the Chinese Communist Party now. So that's the kind of pressure that's happening in the human rights space. But what about international institutions themselves? The CCP has strategically rolled out an effort to try to undermine and to take over the institutions of the United Nations, which has resulted in a dependency upon the United Nations, the dependency of the United Nations upon it, upon the CCP. No fewer than 15 UN specialized agencies are now headed by Chinese nationals. These include the Food and Agriculture Organization, the International Telecommunication Union, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and the International Civil Aviation Organization. These are huge and important institutions. We see the effect this ownership now is having to the detriment of the common good and to the detriment of the international order. For example, just one example, the exclusion of Taiwan from ICAO, from the International Civil Aviation Organization, at the request, the specific request of the PRC, clearly imperiled public health during the pandemic, where Taiwan was excluded from discussions and not allowed to be a party to key pieces of information. With its contribution, with the PRC's contribution to the United Nations rising to 12% of the UN regular budget, China is now currently the second largest monetary contributor to the UN. But it isn't the only way that the PRC undermines international institutions. Through the One Belt, One Road initiative, which has been spoken about, many emerging economies have become heavily dependent upon the PRC for investment opportunities. The prospect of losing such investment for them would have serious consequences. And so we shouldn't be surprised that the PRC uses this investment as diplomatic leverage when it suits them, asking beneficiary nations of One Belt, One Road to back their initiatives at the level of international institutions. Just one example, look at the recent letter in support of the treaty destroying national security law, China's national security law imposed upon Hong Kong. China rallied no fewer than 53 nations to back that in a letter. In my view, that would not have been possible without One Belt, One Road. So what's the result of all of this? It means that the institutions of the UN do not function in the way that they should. It means that the question of suspected genocide of Turkic Muslims in the Uyghur region of China cannot be determined according to the normal routes. Genocide determination cannot be reached through the institutions of the United Nations. This normally happens by referral to the International Criminal Court from the UN Security Council, or it happens through a tribunal established under the UN Human Rights Council. Neither are possible, and the reason they are not is that the Security Council route would be vetoed by China, and because of China's majority on the Human Rights Council, any effort to establish a tribunal would almost certainly fail. It would fail. These are just few examples of the ways in which China's influence undermines the very guarantors of the international order. Now, I'm touching very briefly upon this because the way in which this is happening is heavily strategic, is very broad, and is on many different fronts. But the PRC is also undermining fair play in trade. So we've spoken about human rights. We have spoken a bit about the international institutions, but what about trade? Well, their undermining of trade happens through, among many other things, theft of intellectual property, elite capture. And this is the phenomenon that refers to the PRC developing and cultivating individuals, paying them very high salaries, people from elite parts of society, and co-opting them onto the boards of their organizations and institutions and even state-sponsored organizations, even state-sponsored media organizations. They do this to undermine and strategically seek to own key national institutions. Okay, so I've just sketched out a few ways in which the CCP is a threat to the international rules-based order and the human rights system, but there are many, many more. IPAC, the Interparliamentary Alliance on China, is an effort among legislators to push back by showing that there are matters which transcend party politics and domestic politics. We are seeking to assert three things. First of all, that we prize and value the international system. Secondly, that we recognize the threats that it's currently facing. And third, that we are prepared to defend them, to keep that system true to its founding purposes. And these things can only be achieved by coming together. Now, this gives me an opportunity to appeal to my Indian friends and say, we have yet to welcome India into the Interparliamentary Alliance of China. This is something we really want to do. And Ninong earlier referred to this. We need the world's largest democracy to be a part of this group. We need them to be there with us, shoulder to shoulder, in defending common values. So I really hope we can change this soon. And if there are people on this call with good BJP connections, do reach out to me. IPAC is now 18 legislatures around the world. We want it to be 19 and more. Now, we are now hearing, encouragingly, that democratic governments are increasingly working together and recognizing that the CCP poses a truly existential threat to the international order as it was originally conceived. There's been talk of a D10, an alliance of 10 democratic governments, and this should be welcomed. There's also been a recent tendency amongst foreign ministries to prepare joint statements together on China-related issues. This is also to be welcomed. Because no country can do this alone, and we must do it together, and my appeal to the people here is that if you have ways of building alliances with other people, do not wait for other people to form those alliances. Do it yourself. That is exactly what I did with IPAC. I am not a politician. I did this purely by organizing politicians. Let me tell you that when you push on this, you're pushing on an open door. People want to collaborate, seize the initiative, do it yourselves, and promote that unity in defense of the rules-based order that we all need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Livji. Thanks for raising the issue of human rights defense, etc., of ethnic minorities and religious minorities, and concern over UN and its 15 bodies that are under the direct influence of CCP. Thank you. May I please invite Mr. N.C. Bipendra for concluding remarks?
Thank you very much, Rahul, for this. Make my closing remarks for this event. In fact, before I move ahead and say a few words on what are my thought processes on this issue, let me just recognize the presence of a few senior Indian Armed Forces personnel who had and who are my well-wishers here currently on call in this event. Vice Admiral P.C. Jacob is here. He's based in Kolkata. He's heading the Global India Foundation there. Sir, thank you very much for joining and blessing me and my work, sir. Thank you very much. I also want to recognize the presence of Lieutenant General Vinod Bhatia, who heads the CENJOS, Center for Joint Warfare Studies think tank in Delhi. So thank you for your presence and your support, which I get always. I also want to recognize Major General Prasad, who is here today, and a few other interesting personalities. Advaita Kala was here. Advaita Kala is a screenplay writer and a popular social media personality. She's also here. And Dimitrios Trikis is he's heading the Center for Economic Warfare and Geopolitical Stability think tank in Iceland. He's also here. Thank you very much for joining here. Abhishek Ranjan, Lantern Analytica. He's a great supporter of Law and Society Alliance. He's here. Thank you very much, Abhishek ji, for your presence. Brigadier S.K. Chatterjee is another well-wisher of mine. He's also here. Sandeep, who heads the Center for South Indian Studies, he's also here. It's all think tank based in Delhi, headquartered in Delhi, but works among the South Indian states on economic, social, and other aspects of the southern states of Tamil Nadu. He's also here. Thank you very much. Just also to announce that Zhou Fengshu, of President of Humanitarian China, is indisposed. He could not participate. He messaged me that he's indisposed and is unable to, but he sends his best wishes for the success of this event. So I thank him for that. He's a very dear personal friend. So his presence is really felt is would have enhanced the event, but we miss him today in this event. But we wish him speedy recovery and to join us in the next event very soon. Anthony Clan has regretted participation. I just wanted to make that announcement also. But he will join us in some other event some other time on the same platform. So with this, I just wanted to also mention that Luke Pulford was supposed to speak at the number three slot today, but it was not by design, but it so happened that he was the last speaker. But what a finish! I think this is the most perfect finish this event could have had. He actually hit the nail on the head, and the kind of thought process that Law and Society Alliance and Defense Capital has had on the issue of democratic China. In fact, as my closing remarks, what I wanted to propose was that, as Luke rightly pointed out, the alliance need to be established by our own efforts. We shouldn't be waiting for somebody else to take an initiative. So that is where the Law and Society Alliance thought that we should bring together all like-minded pro-democracy activists, thinkers to come together on this platform today. So what I propose is that these organizations, this event today, and many more organizations which we would like to associate with should jointly organize democratic China event and a campaign every year around October 1. We can have it in multiple locations, or we can host if the COVID situation eases and it becomes a better situation for traveling, and also to get together and meet people individually and in person, which I always love to. I think we should organize this kind of an event, annually. This kind of a major conclave annually at some point or some location around the world, and let it not be be one center or one organization led event. Let every organization which is part of this democracy movement, pro-democracy movement, take responsibility and also own up this movement and the campaign and organize it. We would ask for volunteers to organize it. I would request Thinley Chuki, Luke Pulford, personalities, including Salman Chishti Saab, to take the initiative and to bring together pro-democracy forces around the world and ensure that the CCP changes its colors. And there is a movement within China too for democracy, and the entire world comes together and push for democracy in China. And all the democratic nations in the world, as Luke rightly said, should also take the initiative and come together. As he requested, we would certainly ensure that some Indian parliamentarian joins his IPAC initiative that he has done. You the right people for you from India to participate, the right parliamentarians. I just want to mention that the Law and Society Alliance is a non-partisan organization as far as India is concerned. We don't belong to any political, leanings. We have had participation from both the ruling and the opposition party members in our event. Basically, issue-based, on issues that are like-minded. We bring parties, parliamentarians, and politicians together from all sides of the divide. That's one thing that I wanted to tell everybody. So I leave it to. I've made this initiative. Law and Society Alliance has made this initiative. I now transfer this responsibility to all the organizations and the representatives who spoke today to take forward this movement. And I will be a foot soldier of this movement. Please lead this movement. I request all of you to lead this movement. These are my closing remarks. With this, I thank each and every person who has. I'm not going to be, calling out and naming each person who has joined here today and who have honored me by accepting my request and joining this event. I thank you all. I now hand over to Rahul to conclude the event with a vote of thanks by our Secretary General of Law and Society Alliance, Advocate H. Kumar Vaidyanathan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for putting your concluding remarks. Now, I would like to request Advocate H. Kumar Vaidyanathan ji to propose a vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, Rahul. It was a wonderful insight on how we can save the world and ensure that the democratic process starts. In fact, the beginning has been made, and I wish to thank Law and Society Alliance and its co-host Defense Capital for organizing such a wonderful event. And I wish to thank all the eminent participants and the speakers who have thrown light and have guided us as to how the beginning can be made, not for the sake of India alone, but for the entire humanity and being a world cause. And like how Bipindra ji has suggested, we need to take it forward. So we'll be trying to ensure that the ball starts rolling and there is a momentum created. And it has been organized on a very special day. And let us try to ensure that the democratic process starts, because none of us would have thought that the USSR would have such a stage, but so the beginning has been made. So let us try to see that it gets done. I thank all the participants who have joined us and all the eminent speakers. Due to the passage of time, I'm not taking each and every one of your name, but it was we are totally grateful to each and every one of you who have taken out time and joined us, and it has been an extremely enlightening and informative evening. And thank you all for providing us with such great ideas and trying to ensure that we move forward in this issue. Back to you, Rahul. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Can I say one thing? I think, if I may, I think that was a brilliant session. And I think the Luke Pulford has really given us a real way ahead as to how we should go. And I don't think we should wait till the 1st of October next year. I think strike while the iron is hot. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that wonderful suggestion. Yes, the campaign will continue. You will be leading us in this journey, sir. Thank you so much, sir. And as Rahul, you want to conclude, or shall I just conclude the event with my announcing the next event?
Yes, sir. No, sir. From my side, it is done.
Okay, fine. Thank you so much. So the next event that Law Society hosting will be on India-China relations, and this event is going to be happening in the third week of October. The dates and the theme of the event will be announced later. And following that, we have we are organizing a special musical event of Uyghur European Ensemble in the last week of October. So the dates for that also will be announced. They are a music group that sings and plays music and entertains people on issues of freedom and democracy. So it will be wonderful to listen to them in the last week of October. So these are our future events. So I look forward to all your cooperation and support and participation in our future events. Thank you very much. With this, the program ends, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon in another event. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for the Law Society Alliance. It's a wonderful event. And
thank you, Shannon. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure having you on the show. Yes.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Ilshad. Thank you so much, Ilshad, for joining us. It's a pleasure having you and listening to you. Rahul, stay back. Rahul, are you there? Kumar, please stay back. Huh?